Hey everyone. Well, we'll go ahead and get started just with some housekeeping items and announcements. But thank you all again for being here tonight. We're excited to have you as part of our Monday guest speaker series. My name is Shannon Sheehy. I am the manager of strategic partnerships for CodeU, which is just kind of a fancy way of saying I lead our careers team. So if you're looking for any sort of help with job hunting, whether it be like a resume review or help getting connected to employers or what sort of jobs you should be looking for. My team handles that. So if you're not sure who your career coach or your tech employer specialist is, please feel free to shoot me a message on Slack and I will get you connected to those folks. Before we get to tonight's speaker, we have just a few announcements and kind of just reminders for everybody. So the first one being, we're still working on building out our slate of speakers. I know that we have at least a couple definitely confirmed for April. I think we're going to have at least one more between now and then. So keep an eye on the announcements channel in Slack where we will post all of those and we will have that information for you. If there is a topic you're interested in hearing about, or if you yourself have a topic you'd like to present on, please feel free to send me a message in Slack. We will do our best to find a speaker. If it's just a topic suggestion, we'll do our best to make that happen. Second, our careers team is working on putting together some more engaging events, so keep an eye out for those. A couple weeks ago, we held our first ever industry night event here in Louisville. That went really well, so we're hoping to do more of those in-person events. We're hoping to partner with some of our partner organizations in our other regions, so Northern Kentucky, Lexington, and Eastern Kentucky, to get some events going there as well. So keep an eye out. And then finally, if you're attending as part of your career readiness requirement, please remember to fill out the Google form in your classroom. If you have questions on that, you can message your career coach, which is either Jenny Terry or August Map. And if you can't find them, feel free to send me a message and I will get you connected to them. A couple housekeeping items. Please keep yourself muted as much as possible throughout the presentation. There's a lot of us on here, so we just want to minimize noise as much as possible. There is a little chat box down in the bottom right. You should see a little message icon. And then our speaker actually has another chat option that we can use to submit questions so that you can get those submitted anonymously for the Q&A, which we will have plenty of time for at the end. So for tonight, we are joined by Stef Hogan. Stef is actually a grad school classmate of mine. So we have known each other for a long time. So in addition to talking about Agile and product, she's a great person to talk to about transferable skills and kind of taking your knowledge or past education and transferring that to a new industry. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Stef. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Stef.
Cool. Thanks, Shannon. Hey, everybody. I'm going to post another chat link in the chat. It's called Slido. I don't know if you guys have used it, but I like it because you can submit questions and then you can vote on one another's questions too. So feel free to use that if you want. If you don't want to, totally fine as well. So I have a short presentation for you guys, and how I like to do these things is what I've learned through being in tech for as long as I've been in tech is that I've been to a lot of presentations where people are like, this is how it should be. And then I've realized throughout my years that everywhere is different, right? So I wanted to provide you guys kind of with some truths that I've seen across the different areas that I've worked in. I'm not sharing. Let me share my screen, and this will help probably. Okay. All right, I think you guys can see my screen. Can you guys see my screen? Yes?
It's pulling up. I think we're good now. I see agenda.
Okay, cool. Excellent. So anyway, I'm going to try to provide you guys just with like some higher level things, a little bit about myself, and then I do want to leave a lot of time for any questions or discussion items. Like I said, I think everywhere I've been functions a little bit differently, which is why I love being in tech and I love what I do because I love learning. But I want to give you guys enough time to ask like specific questions that you might have or different scenarios that maybe you're currently going through or think you may go through in the future. So all that being said, also I'm very laid back, chill person. So if you have a question about something on one of the slides, feel free to just come off mute and ask that question. Let's see. All right. So a little bit about my professional background. So I've been a Scrum Master or Agile coach for the last 12 years now. Right now, I'm currently the Director of Engineering Operations at a startup called Skipify. So kind of how I've done my career strategically is I started first working in a startup called Ready App, which is based out of Louisville. I worked in tech support there, and then the Scrum Master at the time actually was going on maternity leave. And she was like, "Hey, Steph, do you want to fill in with me when I'm gone?" And I said, "Sure." So she kind of trained me and then she went on maternity leave and never came back. So I became the Scrum Master and I absolutely loved it. I've gotten my certifications and all of that. I moved on to another startup out of Louisville. And that's when I started kind of really realizing that I wanted to make this a career for myself. And how I approached that is I wanted to kind of figure out what type of company I wanted to work in. So I actually had a stint at Humana, which obviously is like a large enterprise company. I learned a lot through that. I learned a lot of the pain points that large companies go through that startups don't really have to think about and vice versa. After that, I went to a mid-level company. It's a data analytics company that's called 8451, based out of Cincinnati. That was a great experience. It kind of gave me another like new view on different challenges that engineers have and just in general pushing product forward. And that landed me here at Skipify. I learned through all of these things that I really love working in startups. When I joined Skipify, there were around 30 of us, and I think there's like 85 right now. So I really like building teams, building efficiencies, and I don't enjoy a lot of like the red tape and the slow movement of large companies. So I really like working at startups, and that's kind of where I've found my niche. Um, and then I guess just to backpedal for a second, I don't know, I don't know how much knowledge you guys have in general over like Scrum Masters and things like that, but essentially what a Scrum Master is they're kind of like the servant leader of the engineering team. So usually when you join a company and you're on an engineering team, you're going to have other engineers. And when I say engineers, I mean developers. I kind of use the same engineering developer, same thing to me. So you're going to have developers, you're going to have product people, and then you're also going to have Scrum Masters. And what we do is we kind of advocate for the engineering side for there to be certain structures and processes in place so that you guys as engineers can like stay heads down on your work and be building things efficiently and as fluidly as possible, right? So that's what I mean whenever I talk about Scrum Master. And then an Agile coach is essentially just kind of like the coach of the Scrum Masters. So same idea there. There's my dog, Woodson. I was trying to find a way to fit my dog into this presentation, so that was it. Um, so on the left here, these are just some things that I have a lot of experience in and that I'm passionate about in general. So a big thing for me is career development. Right now I have um, eight engineers or developers that level up to me, and then 4 product owners. And I'm really big on career development. I always love to learn myself, but also like make sure other people have the capacity to keep learning. So career development is big for me. Team building, like I said, one of the things I love about working at a startup is like being being here when it's little, right? And then like hiring people, building the culture, building the teams together. That's like one of my absolute favorite things. And when you do that correctly, or when I do that correctly, when we all do that correctly, delivery and efficiency quickly follow that, right? When you have a strong team with aligned values, respect, belonging, people are going to work together better. They're going to be delivering better results, working more efficiently together. Something else I have a lot of background in our transformation. So Agile transformation, which essentially we'll talk about here in a second, moving a company from like a waterfall model into Agile. I've been with companies when we've moved from on-prem resources to cloud. So when you think about, it's crazy for me to think about, honestly, but I was, when I first started out, there were like literal physical servers at places I worked, right? And working through transferring that up into the cloud has been fun. And then acquisitions, just because I've worked in startups, I've been a part of a couple acquisitions, which essentially is when two companies combine. So when I started at my current company, we were actually acquired by this company. So going through that has taught me a lot, and I've been through 3 different acquisitions, which is interesting because it's different cultures combining, but it's a big learning and also kind of fun. And then I already kind of hit on this a little bit, but the mentor coaching and hiring stuff that I do, where I'm at now, I've been able to create the hiring process for all of our product people, product managers, product owners, engineers, and our quality assurance teams. And I'm also heavily involved in the hiring for our upward management. So we're right now hiring a chief product officer, and I'm doing a lot of the interviews for that. I love interviewing. I think we've probably all been in like really awful interviews, which is miserable when you're the person being interviewed. So I like interviewing because I love, you know, putting the time and effort into it for the person interviewing, right? Because it is important. All right, so we will jump into SDLC, and this is something that, like I said, I'm not sure like the overall knowledge that everyone has, so I kind of just want to like level set together on what I'm talking about. So SDLC stands for Software Development Lifecycle, right? And it's essentially just a framework that describes every activity in software development, from the idea all the way to someone using it out in the world, right? There are a lot of different models of how to do this. I mentioned a little bit earlier, waterfall. So up until probably like the late 80s, waterfall was really all that there was. Waterfall essentially is one phase has to be finished before moving on to the next. So instead of, let's say you're cleaning the house with your significant other. I'm coming up with this on the fly, so let me think through this. So let's say you're cleaning the house with your significant other. Instead of, hey, I'm gonna dust while you vacuum, it's we're gonna vacuum, then we're gonna dust, then we're gonna do this. It's like everyone's doing the same thing until the house is completely finished, right? The issue with waterfall in software is that because building software takes so long, by the time you're done building the thing, it might not even be needed anymore. So a great example of this is probably everything government related. A lot of the government agencies still do waterfall. So they'll have a great idea. They'll start planning it out. They'll start thinking through it. Then they'll start doing it. And they won't release whatever it is until the very, very end, right? It could be 2 years later, and then the thing that they thought was great isn't even needed anymore. It's a lot of wasted time. So in the late 80s, early 90s, there was this new idea around Agile, which I'm sure hopefully you guys have heard of. There's like the Agile Manifesto. There's a lot of different types of Agile, right? When you break it down to its core, Agile is just iterative development. So instead of waiting until the end to release the thing to the people that are going to be using it, you're releasing it in small iterations. So you might release a mobile messaging app, and all it does is send messages, right? And then the next release, you're going to be able to forward messages. The next release, you're going to be able to change the message bubbles, maybe. The next release, you're going to be able to send small pictures, right? Then GIFs. So instead of releasing all of it waterfall at the very end, you're doing it iteratively. This is the model that a lot of people use because usually it ends up being quicker in the long run because it's highly motivating for engineers to like see what they're building out in the world. And then also you're getting real-time feedback from people using it. So if you release your mobile messaging app and I don't know, the font's really small and people are really pissed about it, you're going to get that feedback, and that's going to be something that you're going to iterate on and make the font larger, right? Or maybe you're going to make a feature where you can choose the size of your font. So like I said, Agile is what's being used today most places. There are a lot of different types of Agile. There's safe Agile, which is what Humana was doing when I was there, and that's kind of like big enterprises use safe Agile. There's just kind of like regular everyday Agile, which is what a lot of startups use. There's value stream Agile. There's a ton of different kinds. If you ever get bored, you should look into it maybe. But overall, it's just iterative development. And like I said, most models of software development are going to be some form of Agile. Waterfall, for the most part, is dead, or it should be. Like I said, I know government agencies still use this, which is not shocking. But like I know NASA does Agile now, and like a lot of like the cooler, hip government things are Agile. This is just kind of a visual representation that I like of SDLC. So as an engineer or as a developer, you should be involved in every single phase of this, right? So there's the plan, and you'll notice the plan that that arrow is pretty short, right? And that goes towards what we just said. You're taking everything iteratively. So you're not going to be planning for months and months before you start executing. It's let's plan the next 2 weeks of work. All right, let's design, develop, test, deploy, review, demo. Let's launch it. Okay, we're planning again, right? So this is just a model that I personally like, this visual. It shows kind of how everything is continuously flowing. And like I said, as a developer, you should really be involved in all parts of this. Planning, so you know what you're building. Obviously, like the designing, developing and testing, deploying, reviewing, and of course the launch as well. Like I said, I'm trying to keep this like a little high level, not too deep, and then we can have more discussion at the end of this. But some best practices as you get into your engineering or development career, always think about partnerships, right? So as someone who is a software developer, engineer, you are an extension of the product team. You are an extension of the product. This is really important. I've worked places before where engineering and product haven't worked together as a partnership. It's more unhealthy tension, and there should always be healthy tension between product and engineering. Product is also always going to be asking for you guys to be building a little bit more than you probably can, or a little bit quicker than you probably can, right? And that's okay. You just have to make sure that you're not kind of stretching yourself too thin, and that you're also just being really transparent with one another. This kind of goes into the active engagement. So like I said in the previous slide, working with product and working with your team you should be actively engaged during all phases. What this will look like, obviously, is asking a lot of questions. really understanding what you're building. Something that I like to tell people a lot is product should provide what and why. So your product owner or your product manager who's kind of prioritizing your work, they should be bringing to you what they're wanting and why, what the value is. You guys as engineers get to figure out how to deliver that, which is the fun part, being a developer, right? So that's the technical part. That's the breaking it up into pieces. How are we going to execute this part? It's really important to ask questions because even as an engineer, you really need to understand the value that you're bringing, because maybe there's a better solve than what product is kind of asking you to build, right? So something I always tell new engineers and just developers in general is ask questions and make sure you understand it. You're going to build something a lot better if you understand why you're building it and you understand who you're building it for. The other thing here is relationship building. I think this is something that is glossed over a lot whenever we talk about technical jobs or technical programs. So we focus a lot, obviously, on the coding part, but the other side of it is the soft skills. So the better your relationship is with your teammates, with the other engineers on your team, and with the other product people that you're working with, the QAs, whoever it is, the better your experience is going to be. I always tell engineers or software developers to schedule regular one-on-ones with their product manager or product owners. It doesn't need to be weekly. Usually I tell people, like, start off monthly and then adjust. Maybe monthly isn't enough and you should go every other week. Maybe monthly feels weird and you're going to do every other month. I think that monthly is usually the sweet spot. Anything less frequent than that, like every other month or something, I don't feel like is super helpful. But I would say at least regular one-on-ones are a really great idea with your product manager or product owner, just to get to know them better and learn more about them as a person and what they're trying to do. Trust and transparency. So this kind of encompasses everything we've already talked about. So as an engineer, you're always going to be, usually, almost always, hopefully always, on a team. And there's nothing more important on a team than trusting one another and being transparent. When we talk about engineering being the how of the discussions, you have to be honest on the feasibility of certain things. Your product partners might be asking you to do something in a couple days, and you know it's not going to be a couple days, right? It might be a week or two. You have to be able to bring those things up and trust one another and share those things with one another. The other thing that's important with trust and transparency is around like areas to improve or areas of growth. This is something that I personally do a lot, and I talk to a lot of my people about doing this as well. Whenever you join a company or you join a team, again, you're there to like support one another and work with one another. So if you have a teammate another engineer who's your tech lead or a senior engineer, and they're really great at documentation and you are not good at documentation, that's a great opportunity to reach out to that person and just talk to them about like, hey, me personally, I do struggle with documentation, so this is a real thing for me, right? But I had this discussion the other day. I was like, I know I need to document stuff. I'm really bad about making my ideas or thoughts like succinct and to the point. How do you go about doing that? Can you review this? Can you walk me through this? Can you help me grow in this area, right? I think that goes a long way. Number one, for you personally to actually be learning. And then number two, that little bit of vulnerability of like, hey, I want to improve here. Can you help me? That really builds a lot of trust and a lot of respect, right? When people see you wanting to improve, actively reaching out to improve, that's just a really great thing that's very noticeable and very wonderful to see. The other thing here is aligning on goals. So again, when you're on a team, you're working with other developers and other product folks, you want to make sure that you guys are aligned on your goals. Usually teams will have long-term and short-term goals. So a long-term goal might be, we want to do X by the end of Q2. So it might be like a quarterly goal. And then you're also going to be having sprint goals. Usually sprints, everywhere that I've been, they're usually 2 weeks long. So every 2 weeks, you're going to have a couple goals as a team. It's really important to discuss and verbalize those goals, write them down, and like make sure everyone is aligned on the goals. I think I said this before, but there's so much power. There's so much power and trust, transparency, and everything like that when you as a full engineering group with product are really aligned on what you're going after. It makes working together a lot more fun because you're aligned on moving in a direction together. And it just helps you know when you're successful, which is another really good thing. Are there any questions on any of the best practices? Okay. So the next thing here are some anti-patterns. So in general, anti-patterns are essentially like things that you really want to avoid. These are patterns that organizations get into, engineers get into, development teams get into, and they're very like cyclical. It's hard to get out of them once you're in them. So I'm going to walk through a couple that I have seen. Task taker mentality. So something I've seen pretty often, honestly, is software engineers or developers getting into this mode where they're task takers. So the product person or whomever is like, here's a ticket, do it. Here's a ticket, here's a ticket. And you just kind of take it and do it, take it and do it, take it and do it without really understanding the what and the why, right? Which we've already talked about. I think there are certain roles where it's okay to be a task taker. For instance, one of my roles now is I provision different accounts for people like onboarding and stuff. So I'll get a ticket and I'll have to give someone Jira access, and I do it without asking questions because that's a pretty normal thing to do, right? When you're building something or developing something, you really want to understand what you're building and what you're doing. What usually happens if you start getting into the headspace of just task taking is you end up building the wrong things. You're not aligned on the goals. You're not aligned on what's going on. And it usually ends up resulting in a lot of like rework. The other thing with this, whenever you're asking questions, it does help product kind of make sure that they're making the right call too, and that they do want you to be building the thing that you're building. Something kind of similar but different is scope creep. So what I mean by this is scope creep can be in a ticket that you are doing, or it could be like within the sprint. Within a sprint, usually what I see is maybe the product people, after the sprint has started, they give you more work, and maybe you can't do that work, right? And then from an engineering side, what I see a lot is you're in the code and you are building something, and you're in the code and you're building something and you see something that's really messed up and you're like, oh, I'm going to refactor this thing while I'm in here. Usually that's fine. But if it's going to take a lot of time to refactor that thing, you should probably create like another ticket, or at least have a discussion and say like, hey, if I do refactor all of this, then, it's going to be an additional several days before this is finished, right? So I think the big thing with scope creep is that it's okay to increase the scope. You just have to make sure that you're having a discussion around it and everyone's aligned on it. The other anti-pattern, which we've kind of already touched on a little bit everywhere, is lack of collaboration. So task taker not collaborating together and not being like aligned on the goals and stuff. The more that you collaborate with one another, the better the outcomes are going to be, right? Asking questions, one-on-ones, being present in the discussions, collaborating as much as you can with one another is always going to be way, way better than the opposite. I think that I'm almost done, and then I'll answer some of the questions that have popped up. I think for the most part, maybe you guys are either new developers or maybe will be new developers soon. So I just wanted to touch on some of the things that I have seen and some advice. So imposter syndrome is real and it's awful and it's difficult to fight through sometimes. I've interviewed a couple of people that have come from similar programs, and I've hired a couple of them. And whenever I get to know them, they're always like, I was really worried I wouldn't know enough, or I wouldn't this, or I wouldn't that. And I would just encourage all of you guys to really understand that the fact that you're in a program like this stands out on your resume for people like me, because you have the motivation to be learning like outside of your regular life, right? You're learning something, you're dedicating time to it. And for me, as someone who hires engineers, and a lot of people that I've worked with who hire engineers, that's something that is like really, really amazing to see, because we know when we hire you, you're going to keep learning, you're excited about this new career, and you're like fully diving in. So as you're looking for jobs, or maybe as you're in your first job, whenever you're kind of feeling that like imposter syndrome lurking in, acknowledge it and then push it away, because there's something really great about people like you guys that go through these programs, right? And it does make you stand out. So just remember that. The other thing, we kind of touched on this too around one-on-ones. I talked about it a lot with like doing it with your product people, but also do it with your other engineers. You'll probably have senior engineers or senior developers and tech leads on your team. Make sure to meet with them every other week or monthly, just to get to know them better, and then to ask them questions and just kind of pick their brain. It's always a great idea. Pair programming, of course. The other thing that I like to tell people when they start new jobs, and hopefully you guys do this already, is writing down anything you don't know. I do this every new place I work, because like I said before, every single place I've been is different, which is crazy, because it seems like it shouldn't be, but it is, right? I always write down any words that I have no clue what the hell they mean. At the end of the day, I'll be Googling them, or I'll be searching like in the wiki. I'll be asking questions about them. But that's a big thing that I always tell new developers. Write down any terms you don't know. Write down anything that you see that you don't understand. Look into it on your own. And if you're still unsure, definitely ask questions and bring it up, right? And just keep learning. Oh, and that was the last one. Keep learning. So that was the end of my presentation. I think if you scan that thing, it should hopefully take you to my LinkedIn if you guys want to connect. But let me look at some of these questions. Let's see. How do I see questions in here?
When I clicked the link that you gave me, Steph, I can see.
Oh, let me go to the link. I was looking in the Google chat. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. There are a few in the link that you shared.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm just going to go top to bottom. Is there a trend for a preferred kind of Agile, or does it depend on the needs of a development and team organization? That's a great question. Usually it depends. If you are at an organization that is large, like a Humana, I'm trying to think of other big organizations, Yum Brands, a lot of the larger companies you go to, for the most part, they're always going to do safe Agile, which is kind of like a scaled up version of Agile. Essentially, you'll have 5 or 6 teams like in a group, and like 5 or 6 groups of those teams. And then you'll have one person who's like coordinating all of the releases. I'm not a huge fan of Safe Agile just because it's like a lot of like overhead, but that's why large organizations have to use it because usually they do have a lot of overhead and a lot of things that they have to check off before they can go live with anything. Um, and then otherwise, it really does just depend on the organization. What I've seen is usually organizations start at like the basic Agile, and then as it's working or not working, they adjust it, right? Um, the model that I'm using right now is kind of a hybrid model between like I said, there's a million different kinds of Agile, but there's an Agile called Spotify model. And what we're doing here at Skipify is mostly Spotify model with like some different tweaks and things there. So it does really depend. Although the Agile might be different where you go, it's still kind of rooted in the same ideals around like collaboration, planning, demoing, committing to work, and making sure that everyone's like working together cohesively. Um, let's see, where can I learn more about Agile processes on my own? There's a lot of different, let me stop sharing here. There's a lot of different documentation and stuff you can find on Agile. Um, I don't know if you guys are familiar with medium.com, Medium. Um, you can probably go in there and just like search Agile and find a lot of different stuff on it. What I can do is I can find some of my favorite articles and I'll send those to Shannon and she can maybe send it out to you guys in an email after this, maybe tomorrow or something. Um, the good thing about Agile is that because it's so popular, there's a lot of stuff everywhere on it. The bad thing about Agile is because it's so popular, there's a lot of stuff everywhere on it. So I'll find some different articles and some good articles that I like, and I'll send those over to Shannon to get out to you guys. There are certifications for certain things in tech and project managers. Is there a certification needed in Agile? Yes. There are a lot of different certifications. Scrum Alliance has a Scrum Master certification as well as a product owner certification. There are a ton of different ones. I don't really think any is better than the other. From the jobs that I've applied to and that I've gotten, people just care that you have a certification. They don't really care like which certification it is. At least that's been my experience. So I usually steer people towards the Scrum Alliance certifications because I believe they're the cheapest. And I think since COVID, they also offer like an online certification, which if you can go in person, it's great. But online is also really wonderful. So I would recommend that one. Let's see. Is an Agile PMP cert a good idea? I think it depends on what you're trying to do with the Agile PMP certification. Um, I do not have the Agile PMP certification, and I think it just depends. If you're at an organization that's like requiring it, then it's probably a great idea. Obviously, it is one of the certifications that I believe is a lot more lift. I think there's like a lot more hours, and I'm pretty sure it's a longer test. Um, so if you're really trying to like dive into it and learn a lot and really be challenged, it might be a great certification. But other than that, I honestly don't know too much about that one. Um, have I worked on teams that struggle with communication, and how did I get over the barriers? So the answer to that is yes, I have. I think that for the most part, every place I've worked and every team I've worked on has struggled in some way, shape, or form with communication. Um, you think about forming a team and then maybe someone quits and someone new starts. or you get a new product person and you're kind of dealing with different personalities or working styles, it always kind of shakes up communication, right? My recommendation and what I do with a lot of my teams struggling with communication is we do like a ways of working session. And essentially what that is kind of like aligning as a group on what our shared expectations are of one another. So it's kind of like a shared commitment from one another. And a lot of that focuses on communication. So how we communicate in the tickets that we're doing, how we communicate verbally, how we communicate through documentation, whatever it is. We go through a lot of that. And then something else I really like to do with a lot of my teams is we go through an exercise where we each think about this and then share it out of like, in order for me to do my best, I expect you to. And that's a really powerful exercise that I love using with software developers. An example of this was I had an engineer the last place I worked, and he was really smart, really bright, but he just struggled getting things done on time, right? And so we did this exercise around, in order for me to do my best, I need you to. And when he shared his out, he was like, in order for me to do my best, I need you to check in with me when I'm working on something. I get easily distracted and it makes things drag on. And I'm like, wow, that was so insightful because I've been wondering why things are dragging, right? So it opened up this lane of communication with him and I where I was like, I don't want to micromanage you and ping you every day and be like, where are you with that? When is this going to be done? Because engineers do not like that. No one likes that, right? But for this guy specifically, he like loved that check-in, right? But anyway, that's a really good exercise that I think is powerful when you're talking about communication and how to communicate better. We also do a lot of retrospectives, which is like an opportunity for everyone to talk like open and honest about what's going well and what isn't. In order to improve communication and be able to have good retrospectives, you do have to have an environment where you feel like psychologically safe to be honest, right? I know that not every workplace is like that, which can sometimes make it hard. The places where I've been, I'd say a majority of the places I've been have been like that, where you can be honest and transparent. There's only one place where sometimes people struggled with it. But as long as you're in a place where you feel like you can be open and heard, I'd say in order to improve communication, you just have to have those moments of like assuming best intent and having like the real conversations around like what's working and what's not working and kind of committing together towards doing something different. What advice do you have on finding my path? I will be looking for my first job soon and I'm not sure where to start. This is a great question. I think that there's obviously a lot of different paths you can go down. And what I always tell people is that you find your path by finding what your path isn't. So for example, Shannon and I went to school I got my master's in sport administration. I now work in software development, right? I found my path by finding what my path wasn't. So my advice to you guys would be to be okay taking a job and maybe understanding that it isn't the right one for you and moving on to something else. I think that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to like stay in a job or keep a job when maybe it's not right or we know that it's not for us. And I know like having a family and other stuff complicates that obviously. But my advice would just be to look at your options, apply to a lot of different kinds of jobs. Maybe you get a job as a software developer and you really don't like it. That's great. You could be a product owner or a scrum master, or you could be a tester. There are a lot of different ways you could go with the knowledge that you're learning in this program. So I think that would be my advice, is just casting a wide net, applying to a lot of different things, and seeing what gets you excited, taking that opportunity, and then see what happens with it, see what you like about it and what you dislike about it. And then your next position or your next job, try to make sure that you're kind of fulfilling what was lacking in the last job, right? It's pretty normal, at least from what I've seen, it's fairly normal for people to kind of start out in one area and then find their path in a different area. A couple of our QA automation engineers started out as front-end developers, and then they didn't like it and they started manually testing, and then they grew into automation engineers and they write automated tests now, right? So I think that the big thing here is that you guys are learning technical skills and technical ideas that are transferable to a lot of different places. And like I said earlier, one of the things that I really care about is like career development and stuff like that. So if you guys ever have like questions outside of this or after this, or need advice or something like that, I love connecting and like chatting with people about this stuff. So please reach out to me. I'm a fairly open book and I enjoy helping people. So don't be shy about reaching out in the future after this if different questions come up, or maybe you guys are in a situation and you need some mentorship or something like that. Let me see. I think there's one more. Not every project is the most exciting. How do you keep up momentum on a project for yourself and with a team when it's not that interesting? This is such a real question because this is reality. We're not always going to be working on like the coolest thing ever, right? Um, and I think this is where some of the stuff I touched on like really comes into play. So the project matters, right? Like you want a project that's exciting and that you really love. You're not always going to get that. Sometimes you're going to be on a maintenance team or something like that. The way that I like to keep those teams motivated is I like to do a lot of like I like to make things fun essentially as a scrum master. So whenever I was working with like a more maintenance type of team at 8451, we would all be in the office like one day a week, and that team and I would always take like an hour in the afternoon on Wednesdays and go do some sort of team building, right? But I think you need to look forward to other things other than the project to kind of get you through it. If it's a situation where you're on a boring project or a maintenance type of team for a long period of time, I think that that's a great opportunity for you to talk to whoever your manager is and just let them know of like, hey, you know, I like my team. I like working here. I've been on this project for a long time and like, I really love learning and I'm feeling really stagnant. So what is my path from here? Like, is this forever for me? Is there a way I can rotate to a different team? Those types of conversations you guys should be having with your managers anyway. But if you are kind of in a spot where you feel like you're in a rut and you're just highly unmotivated because of the project or because of the team that you're on, that's a great thing to do, is just kind of raise it and see what next steps are. I think I got through are there any other like questions or just anything in general?
Uh, Hi there. I had a quick question in the Google Q&A, if you didn't mind.
Let me find that one. What was your question? Because I can't find the Google one.
Oh, it's next to the chat. It's the activities button, and then you hit Q&A. It's
Hmm.
Let me read it. Does writing documentation tend to fall to a specific position? My background is in liberal arts and education, so writing and communication are pretty strong skills for me. Since we were talking about diverse backgrounds in this presentation, I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, so I think it's gonna really, I hate saying this answer, but it's gonna depend, right? So
That's fine.
yeah, as a software developer, you will be writing a lot of maybe not a lot, but a decent amount of documentation. So where I'm at now, we are like creating new services, and the teams that are creating those new services, they are writing the documentation for those services that other engineers are going to be looking at, right? Um, a lot of organizations have technical writers, which might be a career path for you at some point even. And those are the people who can kind of maybe look at what's being released or look at technical aspects and then convert them into like regular people speak, right? Like release notes for the regular person. So I do think if you are a good writer and you're good at writing documentation in general, it does definitely set you apart in these kind of like highly technical roles, because it's fairly rare to meet an engineer that enjoys documentation. It's kind of like a joke everywhere I go of like, oh no one's going to do this documentation. Who are we going to make do it, right? So it's definitely something that really sets you apart. That I don't know if you have a job now, but when you're looking for a job, that's something you can really highlight on your resume that would stand out for sure.
Okay, yeah, you had just said something about, sometimes maybe one person does more documentation than the other person or something to that effect. So got my knowledge jogging. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure.
Steph, just to kind of wrap us up, can you just talk about some of the skills that you look for as you're hiring engineers and especially like people from non-traditional backgrounds like our students are, and just maybe a little bit about what can help them stand out from the pack?
Yeah, so something everywhere that I've been that's really important, and this is something that like fundamentally I believe wholeheartedly in, is like you can teach a lot of people technical skills, but what you can't teach are soft skills. So in a lot of the interviews and resumes in general, like what I look for, obviously technical skills, but from diverse backgrounds, what I look for is like ability to collaborate, ability to have difficult discussions. Um, I've hired a lot of people that have come from like customer service backgrounds. Um, I hired a librarian once, which was great. They were great at documentation. Um, but I think for you guys, something that stands out and what I look for is, like I said, like the motivation to just keep learning, right? And if you're in an interview and you're able to portray that fire that you have of like, you know, this is what I'm going after, this is what I want to do, I love learning, these are the things I'm learning right now. I'm always looking for those types of people, because those developers are the ones that are excited about learning and solving problems. They're not going to be they're not going to look at something and be like, oh gosh, that's too hard. They're going to look at something and be like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to learn, I'm going to dive in. So I think if you guys are able to show that in your interviews, just being like personable people, friendly people, and then showing like your capacity and willingness to learn, it's going to go a really far way. Because like I said, you can teach, for the most part, I'm not going to say you can teach anyone technical skills, because you can't. But if I have a person that has great people skills and mediocre technical skills, I will take them 100 times more than a person that's highly technical with no people skills. Because as you saw in my whole presentation, like being an engineer, like you are working on your own a lot, but there's a huge piece of it that's team collaboration, questions, and like building things better together, right? And that's really hard to teach people, like how to have good discussions and how to talk to each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if some of you all may have been through some of our workshops before, but our career coaches really say a lot of the same things. And you all, even if you're not coming from a tech background, are still bringing valuable skills to the table. It may not seem like it at first, or you may be too close to it to really understand what you might be bringing, but we are happy to help with that because we know that well, we've had a lot of experience working with people from different backgrounds. So we know that we can help you all be successful as well. Something I didn't mention at the top of the call that I meant to add, I don't think I mentioned it, but I meant to add it to my little list, is we reached an exciting hiring milestone today. We got to over 900 tech job placements specifically for the Code Louisville program, which has been around since 2015. So that is so exciting for us. I've been around for about 6 years of that on and off. So it's been really cool to see people grow and get jobs from non-traditional backgrounds. We've had some really varied people throughout the lifetime of the program. We're also pretty quickly approaching 1,000 job placements total between all the programs. So hopefully later this year, we'll have some exciting news to announce about that, because it really is exciting for us. But just want to give a final thank you to Stef. I know I learned a lot, so I'm hoping you all did too. But I think there was some really great information in her talk, no matter what sort of path you plan to go on within tech. Just a reminder, keep an eye out on announcements for our upcoming schedule. I'll share the recording in case there's anything you want to reference. And then Steph, if you want to send me any of those resources you talked about, I can get those out to everybody as well. But
yeah, I was just going to say, I'll send those over to you. And then again, feel free to, any of you guys, if you ever want to reach out and chat, meet up for coffee, whatever, feel free to reach out. I love chatting, and I'm like a huge Agile nerd. I didn't want to deep dive today because I didn't know the capacity for that. But if you guys ever want to deep dive, I'm your girl. And thanks for having me.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your night and look for some updates from me either tomorrow or Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.